On the battlefields of World War II, German soldiers carried a weapon so terrifying that Allied troops could recognize it without seeing it, only by its sound. Stay with this story to discover how one German weapon reshaped infantry combat and earned a reputation that still echoes through military history. During World War II, Germany introduced one of the most influential infantry weapons ever created, the MG42. Designed for speed, reliability, and overwhelming firepower, it became the backbone of German infantry units across every front. Unlike traditional machine guns built to support infantry, the MG42 reversed the logic. German squads were built around the gun itself. Riflemen existed to protect, supply, and maneuver with it. This shift transformed how infantry fought, turning small units into highly mobile firepower platforms. The MG42's most famous feature was its staggering rate of fire. Capable of firing up to 1,200 rounds per minute, it created a continuous wall of bullets that pinned enemy troops in place. Its distinctive sound, often described as a ripping or tearing noise, became instantly recognizable and deeply feared by Allied soldiers. But the MG42 was more than just fast. It was engineered for mass production and battlefield survival. Stamped metal parts made it easier and faster to manufacture than earlier machine guns. A quick-change barrel system allowed crews to keep firing even during prolonged engagements, preventing overheating under intense combat conditions. On the battlefield, the MG42 dominated open ground, defensive positions, and advancing assaults alike. It allowed German units to control space, dictate movement, and delay far larger forces. Whether in the forests of the Eastern Front, the deserts of North Africa, or the streets of Europe, the weapon proved devastatingly effective. Its influence did not end with Germany's defeat. The MG42's design principles shaped post-war machine guns around the world. Variants and descendants of the MG42 are still in service today, a testament to how advanced its concept truly was. The MG42 did not win the war for Germany, but it changed how wars were fought. It redefined the role of automatic fire, reshaped infantry tactics, and set a standard that modern armies still follow. In the chaos of World War II, this German weapon became a symbol of industrial warfare at its peak. Fast, brutal, and uncompromising. As the war continued, the MG42 became more than a weapon, it became a doctrine. German infantry tactics revolved entirely around its presence. Movement, defense, and attack were all planned with the machine gun as the decisive element. Where the MG42 went, the battlefield followed. German soldiers learned to use its fire not recklessly, but intelligently. Short, controlled bursts conserved ammunition while maintaining suppression. Entire enemy units could be pinned down by a single MG42 team, allowing German forces to maneuver, withdraw, or counterattack with precision. In a war defined by speed and pressure, this flexibility was invaluable. The psychological effect was just as powerful as the physical one. Allied soldiers frequently reported the shock of encountering MG42 fire for the first time. Its rate of fire blurred individual shots into a single, continuous roar. Even experienced troops hesitated under its presence, buying German units critical time in both offense and defense. The weapon also reflected Germany's approach to industrial warfare. It was designed to be efficient, durable, and replaceable. Crews could swap barrels in seconds, keeping the gun operational during extended engagements. Damaged parts were easy to replace. This focus on function over elegance made the MG42 one of the most practical machine guns ever built. On the Eastern Front, the MG42 helped smaller German units hold off numerically superior forces. In urban fighting and defensive battles, it dominated streets, corridors, and open approaches. Wherever control of ground mattered, the MG42 excelled. Yet its success also revealed the limits of firepower alone. While the MG42 gave German infantry immense tactical strength, it could not compensate for shortages in manpower, fuel, and strategic coordination. The weapon was brilliant, but war is decided by more than brilliance. Still, its influence outlived the conflict. After 1945, former enemies studied the MG42 closely. Its concepts were adopted, refined, and carried into the Cold War. Few weapons from World War II shaped the future so directly. The MG42 stands as one of the clearest examples of how a single design can redefine combat. It did not merely support soldiers, it shaped how they fought, moved, and survived. In the history of infantry warfare, its legacy remains unmistakable. The MG42 also forced enemy armies to rethink their own tactics in real time. Allied units quickly learned that traditional advances across open ground were no longer viable when faced with such concentrated firepower. Movement had to be slower, more deliberate, and far more coordinated. Smoke, artillery support, and flanking maneuvers became essential whenever an MG42 was suspected nearby. This adaptation revealed the true power of the weapon. It shaped not only German actions, but enemy behavior as well. A single MG42 position could freeze an entire sector, delaying advances and disrupting plans far beyond its immediate field of fire. In this way, the machine gun exerted influence disproportionate to its size and crew. German doctrine emphasized this effect. The MG42 was positioned to dominate key terrain: roads, ridgelines, village entrances, and choke points. It was rarely wasted on random fire. Instead, it was used to control movement, forcing the enemy into predictable paths where other weapons could finish the job. This integration of firepower and terrain made German defenses particularly difficult to break. The weapon's versatility further strengthened its role. Mounted on tripods for sustained fire, used on bipods for mobile engagements, or installed on vehicles, the MG42 adapted to nearly every combat scenario. Few weapons of the era offered such flexibility without sacrificing effectiveness. Even under extreme conditions, the MG42 proved resilient. Mud, dust, snow, and heat rarely stopped it. Crews trusted it to function when other weapons failed, and that trust translated directly into battlefield confidence. Confidence, in turn, influenced morale both for those firing the weapon and for those facing it. By the later stages of the war, the MG42 had become inseparable from the image of German infantry. It represented a philosophy of war that prioritized speed, pressure, and control. While Germany ultimately lost the conflict, the tactical lessons embodied by the MG42 survived. In post-war years, its design echoed through countless new weapons. Nations across the world adopted its core ideas, refining them for new conflicts and technologies. The MG42 became less a relic of a defeated army and more a foundation for modern machine gun development. In the story of World War II, many weapons were powerful and many were feared, but few reshaped infantry combat as completely as the MG42. It demonstrated how overwhelming firepower, when paired with smart doctrine, could dominate the battlefield, and why that dominance would define infantry warfare for generations to come. The longer the MG42 remained in combat, the more clearly its broader significance emerged. It was not simply a machine gun that fired faster than others. It represented a shift in how industrial power, engineering, and battlefield doctrine came together. The MG42 was designed with the assumption that modern war would be fast, brutal, and relentless, and it embraced that reality without compromise. Its presence accelerated the tempo of battle. Engagements became sharper and more decisive, with moments of extreme intensity rather than prolonged exchanges. The MG42 forced decisions quickly: advance, retreat, or be pinned down. This compression of time on the battlefield changed how officers planned and how soldiers experienced combat. The weapon also highlighted the growing divide between technology and human endurance. While the MG42 could fire almost endlessly with barrel changes, its crew still faced exhaustion, stress, and fear. This contrast underscored a defining feature of World War II. Machines were becoming more capable than the people who operated them. Managing that imbalance became a central challenge of modern warfare. Despite its fearsome reputation, the MG42 demanded discipline. Uncontrolled fire wasted ammunition and overheated barrels. Skilled crews understood that the gun's true strength lay in precision and timing, not sheer volume. This balance between power and control made experienced MG42 teams especially dangerous. By war's end, the MG42 had become a benchmark. Any new machine gun was compared against it. Few matched its combination of reliability, fire rate, and adaptability. Even decades later, modern weapons trace their lineage back to its design. In the wider narrative of World War II, the MG42 symbolizes a turning point. It showed how a single weapon, when paired with doctrine and training, could dominate the tactical level of war. It did not change the outcome of the conflict, but it permanently changed how infantry combat was understood. The sound of the MG42 faded with the end of the war, but its influence did not. It lived on in the weapons that followed and in the tactics that modern soldiers still use today. In that sense, the MG42 was not just a weapon of World War II, it was a blueprint for the future of infantry warfare. The MG42 also reshaped how armies thought about sustainability in combat. Earlier machine guns often demanded careful setup and lengthy preparation. The MG42 assumed constant movement and repeated engagement. Its quick-change barrel system, simplified internals, and modular components reflected an understanding that modern battles would not pause for maintenance. War would be continuous, and weapons had to endure that reality. This philosophy influenced logistics as well. Ammunition supply became a central concern for German units built around the MG42. Entire sections existed to keep the gun fed and operational. This reinforced a key lesson of modern warfare. Firepower is only as effective as the system that supports it. The MG42 was not a lone tool, it was part of a tightly integrated structure. The weapon's impact extended beyond tactics into battlefield psychology. For German soldiers, the MG42 provided reassurance. Knowing that such overwhelming firepower was available reduced panic and increased cohesion under pressure. For enemies, it imposed hesitation. Even experienced troops learned to respect its presence, altering plans and delaying movements when MG42 fire was suspected. In many engagements, the MG42 acted as a force multiplier. Small units could defend wide areas, buying time for reinforcements or enabling organized withdrawals. This ability to shape outcomes disproportionate to numbers made it one of the most efficient infantry weapons of the war. Its legacy also reveals an important truth. Innovation does not guarantee victory. The MG42 was technically brilliant, tactically dominant, and widely respected, even by those who fought against it. Yet it could not overcome strategic miscalculations, resource shortages, or the sheer scale of the conflict. The weapon succeeded, the war did not. After the war, this distinction became clear. Former adversaries adopted and adapted its design because effectiveness transcends ideology. The MG42's descendants appeared in new uniforms, new doctrines, and new conflicts, proving that good ideas survive even when nations fall. In the end, the MG42 stands as one of the clearest examples of how a weapon can define an era of warfare. It did not merely serve soldiers, it shaped how they fought, how they moved, and how they understood control on the battlefield. In the history of World War II, few weapons left a deeper imprint on infantry combat than this relentless German machine gun. The MG42 also highlighted the growing importance of suppression over destruction. Its primary value was not in how many soldiers it killed, but in how effectively it denied movement. By flooding areas with fire, it forced enemies to keep their heads down, broke momentum, and created windows of opportunity for German units to act. Control, not casualties, became the measure of success. This concept marked a clear evolution in infantry warfare. Firepower was no longer just about eliminating targets, it was about shaping behavior. The MG42 excelled at this. Its sheer intensity made enemy reactions predictable, and predictability could be exploited. In this way, the weapon turned chaos into something manageable. The MG42 also exposed the increasing role of sound in modern combat. Soldiers learned to identify threats not by sight, but by noise. The weapon's distinctive rate of fire became a warning in itself. Long before it was visible, it was already influencing decisions. Few weapons have ever been so immediately recognizable or so psychologically dominant. Even as technology advanced, the principles behind the MG42 remained unchanged. High reliability, sustained fire, and ease of production became standard goals in post-war weapons design. Engineers understood that battlefield success depended not on elegance, but on performance under stress. In the end, The MG42 represents the harsh efficiency of World War II. It was built for a war of speed, pressure, and attrition, and it performed exactly as intended. While it could not decide the fate of nations, it permanently altered how infantry units fought and how armies measured battlefield control. Among the many weapons of the Second World War, the MG42 stands apart not just for its power, but for its influence. It demonstrated that when firepower, doctrine, and industrial design align, a single weapon can redefine combat itself. The MG42 also revealed how modern warfare was becoming a contest of systems rather than individual weapons. Its effectiveness depended on training, logistics, positioning, and coordination. When all of these elements worked together, the machine gun became devastating. When they failed, even the MG42 could be neutralized. This reinforced a lesson that would define post-war military thinking. Technology must be integrated into a wider structure to reach its full potential. German infantry units understood this instinctively. The MG42 was rarely isolated. It was supported by riflemen, protected by terrain, and repositioned constantly to avoid counterfire. Mobility mattered as much as firepower. A gun that stayed in one place too long invited destruction. Crews learned to fire, relocate, and reappear elsewhere, maintaining pressure while denying the enemy a clear target. This constant movement created uncertainty. Allied units often struggled to identify where the main threat truly was. The MG42 made the battlefield feel larger, more dangerous, and less predictable than it actually was. This illusion of omnipresence amplified its impact far beyond the number of guns in use. The weapon also shaped how soldiers experienced fear. Unlike sporadic rifle fire or distant artillery, MG42 fire was immediate and overwhelming. It compressed decision-making time, forcing instinctive reactions. In that environment, training and discipline became the only defense. The MG42 punished hesitation and rewarded preparation. Despite its fearsome reputation, the MG42 was not invincible. Coordinated artillery, flanking maneuvers, and combined arms tactics eventually countered it. But the fact that entire strategies were built to neutralize a single infantry weapon speaks to its influence. Few tools have ever demanded such focused attention from opposing forces. As the war drew to a close, the MG42 stood as a symbol of what World War II had become: fast, industrialized, and unforgiving. It embodied a shift away from individual marksmanship toward collective firepower and battlefield control. That shift did not end in 1945. In the decades that followed, armies around the world embraced the lessons the MG42 had taught. Modern machine guns inherited its principles, and modern infantry doctrine absorbed its logic. Fire superiority, suppression, and maneuver became universal concepts. The MG42 story is ultimately about transformation. It did not simply serve its era, it defined it. In doing so, it left behind a legacy that continues to shape how soldiers fight, move, and survive in modern war. The MG42 also demonstrated how warfare was becoming increasingly impersonal and mechanized. Individual heroics mattered less when entire areas could be locked down by sustained automatic fire. Victory depended on coordination, timing, and the ability to manage overwhelming force efficiently. The MG42 fit perfectly into this reality, serving as a tool that amplified organization rather than individual skill. Its influence reached into battlefield planning at higher levels. Commanders learned to anchor defensive lines around machine gun positions, knowing that a well-placed MG42 could compensate for thinner manpower. This allowed German units to stretch their forces, covering wide fronts with fewer soldiers while still maintaining control. In a war of vast distances and limited resources, this efficiency was critical. The weapon also shaped how terrain was valued. Hills, crossroads, forest edges, and ruined buildings became decisive not because of their height or cover alone, but because they allowed an MG42 to dominate surrounding space. Terrain and firepower merged into a single concept. Whoever controlled the machine gun positions controlled the battlefield. As Allied forces gained experience, they adapted, but always with the MG42 in mind. Assault tactics emphasized dispersion, use of smoke, and indirect approaches specifically to counter its effects. Entire infantry manuals were rewritten around the assumption that such weapons would be present. The MG42 forced evolution, even among its enemies. What makes the MG42 especially significant is how little it relied on future technology to remain relevant. It did not depend on advanced optics or electronics. Its strength came from mechanical reliability and intelligent design. This simplicity ensured that its core concept would endure even as warfare evolved. By the time World War II ended, the MG42 had become more than a German weapon. It had become a reference point for what a modern machine gun should be. Nations that once fought against it now studied it, copied it, and refined it. Its influence crossed borders and ideologies, surviving the collapse of the regime that created it. In the long view of military history, the MG42 represents a moment when industrial capability, tactical doctrine, and battlefield necessity aligned perfectly. It did not decide the war, but it permanently altered how infantry combat was understood. Long after the echoes of its distinctive fire faded, the lessons it taught remained. Modern battlefields still revolve around suppression, movement, and control, principles the MG42 demonstrated with brutal clarity. In that sense, it was not just a weapon of World War II, but a foundation upon which modern infantry warfare was built. The MG42 also highlighted how modern armies were beginning to think in terms of pressure rather than position. Holding ground mattered, but controlling the enemy's ability to act mattered more. With its sustained, rapid fire, the MG42 turned space itself into a weapon. Open ground became dangerous, pauses became costly, and hesitation became fatal. This pressure reshaped the rhythm of combat. Battles were no longer defined solely by advances and retreats, but by moments of dominance and release. When the MG42 opened fire, it seized control of the situation. When it paused, movement became possible again. This push-and-pull dynamic defined countless engagements across Europe. The weapon's design also reflected an understanding of scale. World War II was fought on vast fronts, with enormous demands on industry. The MG42's stamped construction allowed Germany to produce it faster and in greater numbers than many earlier designs. Quantity and quality met in a way few weapons achieved. It was not just effective, it was scalable. For the soldiers operating it, the MG42 became both a responsibility and a burden. Crews knew they were prime targets. Enemy fire, artillery, and air attacks often focused on machine gun positions first. This reality forged a unique bond among MG42 teams, built on trust, coordination, and shared risk. The gun's adaptability ensured its relevance in constantly changing conditions. As battlefields shifted from open terrain to cities and forests, the MG42 followed. In urban fighting, it dominated streets and corridors. In defensive positions, it anchored lines. In mobile warfare, it provided rapid, overwhelming response. Few weapons transitioned so smoothly across environments. By shaping how both sides fought, the MG42 became part of a broader transformation. Infantry combat moved away from rigid formations and toward decentralized, fire-centered engagements. Control flowed through weapons, not ranks. This evolution would define military thinking long after the war ended. Even today, the MG42's legacy is visible. Modern machine guns still prioritize sustained fire, quick maintenance, and battlefield reliability. The sounds may be different, the materials improved, but the core logic remains unchanged. In this way, the MG42 stands as one of the clearest expressions of World War II's character. It was efficient, relentless, and uncompromising, designed for a conflict where speed, pressure, and endurance decided outcomes. More than a weapon, it was a lesson written in steel and fire, one that continues to shape how wars are fought. In the end, the MG42 was more than a machine gun. It was a statement about modern war, about pressure, control, and the brutal efficiency of industrial combat. It showed how a single weapon, when paired with doctrine and discipline, could dominate the battlefield and force entire armies to adapt. Long after World War II ended, its ideas lived on in the machine guns and tactics that followed. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of history's most influential weapons, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. More powerful stories, forgotten designs, and the weapons that shaped modern warfare are coming next.